All right, hello everybody. I'm Red from Harvest Finance and also AP Wine Finance, and this talk is on the power of nobodies. So I myself am a nobody. That actually comes in like two different groupings that I'll talk about. First, I'm some random on the internet. To most people who see me, I'm that front image of a chimp smoking a cigar. That's my chat room image. So whenever you're doing conversations or business with Red on the internet, you're usually talking to an ape. So that means I'm not defined by my like age, race, or gender. A lot of things that are very topical in the news today, things that may prevent you actually from getting a job in the world today. So ultimately, like stripped of all these identifiers, I am what I contribute, right? Like ultimately a very level playing field within the field of like cryptocurrencies and decentralized finance. But ultimately, we do see a lot of negativity in mainstream media today about this because of Mr. Wonderland over here, who was kind of hiding behind a pseudo-anonymous identity and happened to potentially take a bunch of money from people within that project. But I would also argue that outside of anonymity, there's plenty of people who scam people today. Like at the banks, you hear a lot of investors or people in suits, like at the Deutsche Banks or whatever in the world, ripping people off. And then you also have people like this, influencers in cryptos that are pretty well known in the industry, but you're still willing to give your money away to these people who have $2 billion of your money. So ultimately, again, the argument really isn't that anonymity isn't the problem, it's people, right? And ultimately, as we all know, kind of in the crypto field, it's all about don't trust, verify. We're trying to get away from people, and in order to get away from people, you kind of need that anonymity to force people to look at code, as opposed to just trusting somebody in a nice suit who's ultimately going to steal your money. And even Vitalik kind of says it himself. Ethereum community should do more to be friendly to non-contributors. Again, because there's like this specter, if I don't know who you are or I can't see your face, that you're potentially going to rob me of all of my money. But in the second category, and really the basis of this talk, I am not a developer, so I'm a nobody in crypto. I don't have a revolutionary idea to tokenize and to make you rich. So essentially, I'm a nobody. Feel free to head for the door. You're not going to get much more out of this, right? But I am actually foundational to every single DeFi project that's out there, and especially if you want to call yourself a DAO. I am the community. I'm your protocol user. I'm your liquidity provider. I'm your shitcoin holder. And if we're talking about DAOs, you probably have some kind of governance mechanism within your shitcoin. And so you're voting. And that's what a lot of people are calling themselves a DAO today, because you have this voting mechanism. But ultimately the question is that truly a DAO, right? So I asked the question, what is a DAO? Most straightforward, it's a decentralized, autonomous organization, right? But ultimately, very much in crypto, we talk only about the first two letters, decentralized and autonomous, essentially a self-governing group of people. But we don't really follow through on the acronym and says that self-governing group of people is the business organization around the protocol that generally these DAOs are connected to, right? So does voting really mean DAO? I don't see a V in that acronym, right? Although you can pull it out of autonomous, but really you need to think about your organization as a whole, not just voting. Why? Well, everybody kind of is long known within crypto, there's a disparity in voting. You have a concentration of voters, pre-sale token holders, fans of the project, people that got in early or whatever, who have very large bags of these tokens that essentially can outweigh any vote that any little tiny guy like myself can. And then you also have just low overall voter participation, where you see probably no higher than 10 to 15% of people voting within a protocol. So not only do you have low participation, then basically one or two people's votes are just going to wipe out any of the participation within the vote. And then jokingly, friend of mine, George Harrop, notorious crypto troll, you're still going to want to govern your favorite DAO when it's down 90%. So ultimately that speaks to token ownership and voting. People don't really vote, right? And especially when the market's going to hell, you're probably going to get even less voter participation. So how is that, again, decentralization? And then ultimately, voting only affects the protocol level. Like what about, again, the rest of the organization? Who's doing the marketing? Who's doing the treasury management? Who's doing the customer service? Who's doing the HR? Who's writing all of your articles? Is it the same 3 people that launched the protocol? Is that a decentralized organization if they're still doing all of that work, but they give you a voting mechanism? So let's put it this way. What if JP Morgan launches some code on the blockchain, issues a governance token, and says you can vote? Are they now a DAO? Right? Like, is that what we're going for in this industry? And obviously the answer is no, which means voting cannot be the solution or ultimately what a DAO is. And then Andre Cronje makes a snarky comment about DAOs. Picture your government. Now imagine if every policy had to be voted on by every citizen. And if only quorum was reached, if it would pass. How does that picture look? This is a DAO. Vote no to DAOs. That's an extremist take on DAOs because everybody thinks of DAOs as voting. And in one sense, Andre is correct. If you kind of had that system where every little facet had to be voted on, you would have like procedural paralysis. So what truly is a DAO and decentralization? So let's not take the random nobody's word for it. Let's listen to somebody really important. SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce, known as Crypto Mom, somebody who has extremely friendly outlook or disposition towards crypto, I should say, and ultimately gives this feedback about decentralization. If you want to be decentralized, you really need to be decentralized, and that is going to put you in a different category from the perspective of regulators, because that's not just something that we've dealt with before. If regulators can find a centralized part or group of people that they can grab a hold of, they will grab a hold of them. So I think it's good to be cautious about how you build these things, because down the road it could have regulatory implications. So you think if the SEC comes knocking at your door and say, well, we have voting mechanism, we are decentralized, like, is that going to fly? Well, no, she just said it right there. If they can find you, they're going to get a hold of you, and they're going to do what they're going to do. So ultimately, it's extremely important that the organization should also be decentralized to protect the developers and help ensure the longevity of the protocol. So I say Bitcoin DAO. People don't really think of Bitcoin as a quote-unquote DAO, partly because they have the perception like a DAO has to be like a siloed group of people within like one Discord, kind of pushing in the same direction. But Bitcoin itself has become so decentralized, like everybody's the marketing department, everybody's writing the documentation, everybody's the customer service, and it is this huge, massive organization that cannot be shut down and is no longer dependent on Satoshi Nakamoto. So what does this tell you? Well, long term, that us nobodies that are doing all of these things outside of just protocol development, once Satoshi let go of the code and everybody else, in a sense, took ownership of Bitcoin, long term, nobodies are equal to or greater than the protocol developers themselves who originally deployed the code. So a community of nobodies, your protocol users, your liquidity providers, your shitcoin holders, your security layer from regulation, we're your marketing team, your customer service, your networking, your collaborations, and your alpha hunters. And yes, also your new developers, new community-wide developers who come in and contribute, provide that fresh eyes perspective that even Vitalik himself has said, is so many things have come out of Ethereum that he never imagined, and that was because of community developers, not just him like ruling with an iron fist in this fiefdom, and it's only governance voting that you can do within Ethereum. Daily operations managed by your community includes them in every facet of the organizational decision-making process, eliminating the centralization of decisions without the over-reliance on voting. If your entire organization structure is constantly flowing with people from the community, doing the marketing, sharing the various ideas, I don't need to be like Andre Cronje says, and I need to vote on every single decision. You already see the will of the people already acting out within your organization. So there is no need to take a vote on every little step that you're taking. Yes, maybe at the code level, you need voting to ensure that nothing is going to change and impact some people's money that are deployed within that protocol. But when it comes to things like marketing, writing a new article, sending out a tweet, those are things that you do not need to vote on specifically. And then when prices crash, contributors work harder as opposed to voting less. So think about to George's comment saying, are you really going to vote when your token's down? The antithesis is I see developers mention all the time, I'm so happy we're out of this bull market because now we can go focus back on the code instead of focusing on price talk all the time. Voting is still very important. I know I talk negatively about voting because it's the over-reliance on just a voting mechanism to call yourself a DAO, and instead of true decentralization and spreading the organization among people. So voting is still important, but it's secondary to fulfilling the need of operational roles with non-founding members of the protocol. So Harvest Finance, a little bit of a shill here, but just talking about how we accomplish this at Harvest Finance. So it was initially started by 100% unknown devs. They deployed the code in August 2020. I was just a guy who showed up in the Discord week one. I was like, hey, I want to use this protocol. There's a bunch of farms out there. I would love somebody to help me aggregate all those different yields. I started answering questions in the Discord myself because people tend to ask the same 10 questions over and over again, even though it was just asked literally 3 sentences above. So I would just start answering questions in the Discord, started writing articles myself just based on my own enthusiasm. And a year later, here I am, in a sense, acting as like the face of the community because those developers are unknown. But daily operations are managed by us community, where 95% of the protocol today is actually handled by random nobodies on the internet. I'm doing a podcast or a presentation here. Somebody else handles our Twitter handle account. Somebody else does treasury management. We have developers that write new codes for new strategies that when our yeomans come in with a brand new collaboration that we've never heard about, we can build a strategy in a vault like that. We were one of the first people that deployed a Looks farming vault, and nobody else has done that, and now Looks Rewards is ending, and we were one of the few ones that did it because one of our community members brought that to us, and we couldn't have done that without a community member because you guys know where all the alpha is. So just being able to utilize people like cultivators, translators. Imagine as a traditional business, you had to go out and hire 5 different people that spoke the 25, 30 different main languages that are out there, and you need to translate your documentation, all that constantly. We have people that are extremely happy to do it for $25 a document, and those constantly get churned out, and it's almost like very inexpensive, very motivated, helpful work to our DAO that otherwise in a traditional structure would be extremely cost prohibitive. And then we also have things like a community managed multi-sig treasury. So when the protocol is making money from new deals or collaborations brought in by our community members, that money flows to a multi-sig wallet, which then can be managed by multiple people, multiple sign-offs to ensure there's checks and balances. And then my main show that's coming with this talk is actually about AP Wine Finance because they go hand in hand with Harvest Finance. So if you deposit at Harvest Finance or you deposit at any yield farm, there's hundreds of billions of dollars locked in DeFi and yield farming today. But a lot of the percentages that you see are actually figures of annual percentage rates, right? So I deposit my money there. If I want 50% return on my money, I essentially have to leave my money there for an entire year. So that means billions of dollars are locked in DeFi, and while they are earning a good rate of return on their money, ultimately that money is unusable. AP Wine Finance and like an ELI5 explanation lets you do a payday advance on your yield. So you can get up to 90 days in advance today on your yield that doesn't even exist today, and then go and buy other things with it so you can like YOLO into another farm. So on a higher level, it's almost like a Walmart of yields because people can come in there, sell their yield, and try to sell their yield early. And then there's other people that are buyers who may want to buy yield directly instead of visiting Harvest Finance, Wyern, whatever 20 other yield farms are out there. You have to individually deposit at those, spend gas and transaction fees at each of those individual farms, or you could go directly to AP Wine as one marketplace and buy that yield directly. So those two have a very huge synergistic effect, and why I kind of work for both of those protocols. AP Wine Finance just started within the past month. They launched their V1, or it was about the end of December they launched. And so I'm trying to steer them in the same direction as Harvest Finance. Yes, start out centralized, but as we build up more people within the protocol, more users, as we bootstrap in other projects that we utilize their token, like StakeDAO or Idle Finance, we bring in those communities who then become enthusiastic about us, who want to do future payday advances on their yield. They become part of our community and start contributing, and now we have this huge organic operation at AP Wine Finance as well. So basically, to wrap it up, community very much does matter. Again, I know a lot of people think community is just a bunch of moon boys and shitcoin holders, but ultimately, utilizing the various skill sets of your users, members, beyond just protocol voting, will truly decentralize your organization, and it'll create longevity and a security layer from regulators. Again, very much think back to what Hester Pierce was saying, and if she says if she can find a group of you, they're going to grab a hold of you. So while you may start out decentralized, really making sure you're utilizing people outside of that original structure will help you get to that decentralized layer. And it also builds a support system that's not solely motivated by market factors. Again, a lot of chat rooms you see are purely driven when the dev's going to do something, so the price is going to go up, right? But ultimately, if you replace those factors and give them to something to focus on, you have true buy-in and ownership of this protocol, because your artwork is what we're tweeting out or is what we're using on the front of the website. The article you just wrote is what we're featuring and talking to journalists about and representing your work. And that gives those people immediate buy-in and enthusiasm that goes way beyond just a token price. So again, end story, DAOs are more than just voting. And ultimately, like Hester Pierce says, if you do not decentralize, they will find you and you will die. That's it. Thank you.